In 1969, George Carlin signed a contract that most working comedians would have considered the culmination of a career's worth of effort. The Las Vegas contract was not a small booking. It was a headlining engagement at a major hotel casino on the Strip. The kind of sustained, lucrative, high-visibility work that established a performer's commercial viability in the most concrete terms available. It came with an audience that was large by any standard, with financial terms that would have provided security for years, with a specific institutional approval that the Las Vegas entertainment industry extended to the comedians it chose to feature. Carlin had been working toward this kind of recognition for nearly a decade. He had come up through the small clubs and the television appearances and the long process of building a name. And the Las Vegas contract was the form in which that decade of work was being recognized by the entertainment industry's most commercial sector. He signed it. He showed up. He performed. And less than a year later, he walked away. The walk-away was not an impulsive act. It was not the result of a specific conflict with the hotel or with the management or with any of the institutional structures that the engagement involved. It was something more complicated, the conclusion of a process of recognition that had been building in Carlin over the months he spent performing in Las Vegas, and that arrived, one particular night, with the specific clarity that tends to characterize the moments when a person finally sees something they have been not quite seeing for a long time. What he saw that night, what he understood about the bargain he had made and about what the bargain was costing him, is the part of the story that is missing from most accounts of his career transformation in the early 1970s. The transformation has been told as a story about what Carlin became, about the long-haired counterculture comedian who emerged in the early 1970s with a completely different artistic identity, about the albums that found the audience that the clean-cut television comedian had never quite reached. But the transformation began with a loss, with a decision to stop doing something that was working, in the conventional sense of the word, in order to find out if something else was possible. And it began in Las Vegas, in a hotel showroom, on a night when Carlin stood at the microphone and understood with complete clarity that he was performing for the wrong reasons. What Carlin understood, standing at the microphone in the Las Vegas hotel showroom on the night that the understanding arrived, was not complicated. It was, in fact, very simple. He understood that he was performing in exchange for security, that the contract, the financial terms, the institutional approval, the establishment of his viability in the most commercial sector of the entertainment industry had been purchased at the price of performing material that was not the best version of what he had to offer. That the security and the material were in a specific and unavoidable relationship. The more secure the contract, the more the material had to be what the contract required. This was not a discovery he had not been available to make before that night. The logic had been present from the beginning of the engagement. The relationship between the context and the material was built into the structure of the deal. He had known it. He had accepted it. He had been performing within it. But on that night, in the middle of a bit, the knowledge of it arrived not as an intellectual understanding, but as a physical fact. He was standing at the microphone, giving the audience the version of himself that the contract required, and the rest of himself, the part that had been developing, in the late 1960s, a different sense of what the work could be, was not in the room. The other version of himself was real. He had been working on it. Not systematically, not yet with a fully formed sense of where it was going, but in the specific way that a performer builds their best work, by following the observation wherever it actually goes, rather than wherever the context requires it to go. And what he had been following, in the private process that existed alongside the Las Vegas performances, was something that the Las Vegas showroom could not hold. He finished the bit. He finished the set. He walked off stage and went to the dressing room. And then he began the process of working out what came next. The conversation with his manager was not brief. The walkaway was not immediate. There were practical considerations, the contract, the financial implications, the professional relationships that a sudden departure would affect. Carlin understood all of this. He was not impulsive about it. He was precise. But the decision had been made, on the stage, in the middle of the bit, in the moment when the knowledge of what the Las Vegas contract was had arrived as a physical fact rather than an intellectual understanding. The question after that night was not whether to walk away. The question was how. And eventually he walked away. He gave up the contract, the financial security, the institutional approval, and the specific kind of entertainment industry recognition that the Las Vegas engagement had represented. He gave all of it up. And what he was left with was the part of himself that the contract had not been able to hold. That is what the walkaway was. Not a failure, the decision to find out if the other thing was possible. The Las Vegas of 1969 was a specific entertainment ecosystem with specific requirements for the performers who worked within it. The audience for Las Vegas hotel showroom entertainment was not the same audience that was filling clubs and theaters for the kind of comedy that was beginning to develop in American culture at the end of the 1960s. It was an older audience, more conservative in its tastes, more interested in the familiar forms of entertainment than in the experimental edges of what comedy was becoming. It was an audience that had come to Las Vegas for a specific kind of evening, the dinner, the show, the specific pleasure of being entertained professionally in a context of considerable material comfort. Carlin gave this audience what it wanted. He was good enough at the craft of comedy to perform in a way that the Las Vegas audience could receive and appreciate. He delivered the clean-cut material, the television-appropriate observations, the professionally assembled set that the showroom context required. He was, by all external indicators, successful. But the specific quality of the success was the thing that was wrong with it. Carlin had been aware, in a way that he had not fully articulated even to himself, that the relationship between a performer and an audience is not a neutral thing. It is not simply the delivery of material to a room of recipients. It is a transaction, one that involves the performer making choices, conscious or not, about what they are willing to give and what they are holding back. In Las Vegas, Carlin understood, he was holding back almost everything. The material he was performing in the hotel showroom was not the material he would have chosen if the choice had been entirely his. It was the material that the context required, the material that the audience expected, that the hotel wanted, that the contract had implicitly specified. The sharp edges had been removed. The observations that might have made the audience genuinely uncomfortable had been replaced with observations that produced the comfortable laughter of entertainment rather than the less comfortable laughter of recognition. This was, Carlin recognized, exactly what he had agreed to when he signed the contract. Not explicitly, the contract had not specified that he perform a certain kind of material, but implicitly, in the most specific and unavoidable way, the context had specified it. The Las Vegas showroom audience and the Las Vegas showroom context had made clear, without saying so directly, the kind of comedian they wanted. And Carlin had been performing as that kind of comedian. Night after night, he had walked out in the suit and tie, performed the appropriate material, received the appropriate response, and walked back to his dressing room carrying the specific unease of a performer who knows that what they gave the audience was not what they actually had. But it was on one particular night, a night that was not especially different from the nights that had preceded it, not marked by any external event that set it apart, that the unease arrived at its conclusion. Carlin was standing at the microphone in the middle of a bit when he understood, clearly and completely, what the Las Vegas contract was. Not what it appeared to be, what it actually was. What the Las Vegas walkaway made possible is what the career that followed the walkaway demonstrates. In the years immediately after leaving the contract, Carlin underwent the transformation that his career is most identified with. The suit and tie were replaced by the denim jacket and the long hair. The clean-cut television comedian became the counterculture voice. The material that had been shaped by the requirements of the Las Vegas showroom became the material that was shaped only by what the observation actually required. The albums of the early 1970s, Class Clown in 1972, Occupation Fool in 1973, were built from what had been developing in the private process that existed alongside the Las Vegas performances. The observations that the showroom could not hold, the arguments that the hotel audience would not have wanted, the material that went wherever the thought actually went, without the management that the contract had required. This material found an audience, not the Las Vegas showroom audience, a different audience, younger, more engaged with the cultural moment, more receptive to the kind of comedy that required attention rather than comfort. An audience that grew over the course of those early 1970s albums into the national audience that Carlin had not been able to reach while he was performing the version of himself the contract required. The walkaway looked, from the outside, like a failure. He had given up a successful contract with a major Las Vegas hotel. He had walked away from institutional approval and financial security. He had ended a relationship with the commercial entertainment establishment that most working comedians spent their entire careers trying to establish. From the outside, it looked like the end of a viable career. From the inside, it was the beginning of the actual one. This is the thing that the Las Vegas walkaway demonstrates about the relationship between security and the work. The security that the contract provided was real. It was real money, a real audience, a real institutional relationship. The cost of maintaining it was also real. The material had to be what the contract required rather than what the observation actually produced. When the security was given up, what remained was the observation. And the observation, left to go where it actually went, produced something that the contract would never have permitted. Carlin understood this on the night in the hotel showroom when the knowledge arrived as a physical fact. He understood that the bargain was not sustainable, that the version of himself the contract required and the version of himself that the work required were in a conflict that the contract was winning, and that the work could not survive indefinitely losing. The walkaway resolved the conflict in favor of the work. And the work, once the conflict was resolved, became what it actually was. The transformation of the early 1970s did not happen because Carlin decided to become someone different. It happened because he stopped performing as someone he was not. The Las Vegas contract had been requiring the performance of a version of himself that was not the real one. Walking away from the contract ended the performance. What remained when the performance ended was George Carlin. Not the Las Vegas version, not the television version, Not the version the industry had approved and the showroom had welcomed and the contract had specified. The actual one. The one who had been there the whole time, waiting for the performance to stop. And when it did, the work began.